Welcome back. Right now, as I record, roughly 4 billion people, half of the world's population, are participating in fasting of some type for religious purposes. This year, Ramadan and Lent began on the same day, Wednesday, February 18th. And just days before, and in some of the coming days ahead, some of those within the Hindu faith will also be fasting. Now, we've talked about fasting a little bit before, but with half the planet abstaining around the world, let's talk about the physical and spiritual effects of fasting. Welcome to The Occult and the Apocalypse with Kristen, aka Fire Tara Mama, where I tell you how they took what was once widely known about God, spirituality, and you, and how they took that and locked it away. Come with me while I show you what I've learned from science, religion, cultural beliefs, and mythology to turn the occult and the apocalypse into just the hidden and the revealed. So currently, at this moment, there are more than 4 billion people fasting on Earth, because their religion taught them that it will bring them closer to God. So that makes me wonder, what happens to the body and the mind when we fast? Well, for the body, according to the Mayo Clinic, intermittent fasting, which is the most closely reflective type of fasting that occurs that mimics religious fasting, quotes, may improve some signs of health in the short term, unquote. According to the Mayo Clinic, it supports blood sugar, blood pressure, cholesterol, weight, and chronic inflammation. The long-term effects of eating this way, however, are unknown. Now, there's a study in mice at MIT where researchers found enhanced regeneration using intestinal stem cells, which begins after a period of fasting ends. This period religiously thought as breaking the fast was called refeeding in the study. These stem cells help the intestinal system recover from things like inflammation or even injury. But one noted concern is that during this time, which is referred to as the regenerative period, if a cancer-causing mutation occurred, the mouse was more likely to develop early-stage intestinal tumors. Omer Yilmaz, an MIT associate professor of biology and cancer researcher, who was the senior author on the study, is quoted to say that fasting is good, but if you're, quote, unlucky, unquote, and you're refeeding after fasting, and you are exposed to a mutagen or cancer-causing agent at that moment, it could lead to increasing your chances of cancer of the intestine, albeit likely small. Now, specifically, with the majority of the 3 religions actively participating some form of fasting at this time, it's considered a cleansing of the soul or mind and body. It's considered bringing us closer to God. And it sounds like on a short-term basis, the type of religious fasting being done does help the body run more efficiently. Now, fasting differs slightly from religion to religion. For Ramadan, Muslims will abstain from food, liquids, sex, and smoking from sunup to sundown. There's usually a special meal as a family to break the fast after sundown. It's considered one of the most spiritual times in Islam, and Muslims are usually very encouraging to non-Muslims who see the beauty in the practice and want to participate. Now, Christians are currently fasting in their own way for Lent. And Hindus, the third fasting group this month, have complex fasting days based on the deity, religion, and more factors. Now, interestingly enough, a research group studied the cognitive response of people who were observing Ramadan, and it was determined that although the response time got slower, accuracy increased. So it took longer to observe the situation and select the correct answer, but the selected answer was more often correct. It's also to note that it was identified that people with chronic kidney disease had some additional renal difficulties while fasting. However, this was not present in a post-transplant group. Now, like I said, Christians are also participating in a type of fasting. The variations are different throughout the different denominations. Some will have no meat until Easter. Some will have no meat on Fridays. Some others will also abstain from something of their choosing that they enjoy. It represents cleansing and sacrifice and purification. Now, people with personal accounts on the impact of fasting has said that it's had on their personality have claimed to have had enhanced clarity, stronger connection to the inner self, newfound empathy and compassion, and increased mindfulness of self and environment. It also brings groups that are fasting together, giving a sense of community. And fasting is mentioned 278 times in the Bible, so it's something discussed semi-routinely. Jesus both at different times defended why people had not fasted at one point, as well as teaching how to properly prepare for fast. Now, interestingly, there are references to a prayer and fasting being the source of power, like in Matthew 17, when Jesus is telling the disciples that they could do greater things than he with a mustard seed of faith, but that this particular demon needed fasting and prayer. That whole area around fasting and prayer, that whole verse, has actually been retranslated. It's been taken out. It's not considered a good translation. So in one spot in the Bible, it's telling you, oh, you have to do this thing, fasting and prayer, in order to be able to cast out this demon. And it's showing in better translations that line actually isn't present or isn't present in that way. So is it possible that fasting isn't all it's cracked up to be? Well, I don't know if I go that far. I do think that there's some power in it. However, we've seen areas where it just doesn't seem to be as pertinent within Jesus's teachings. And fasting may help people feel more connected to the divine. And I believe that anything that makes you feel connected to the divine is good, as long as you're not harming anybody, yourself or anyone else or anything, not intentionally. So I think that fasting is okay. You definitely shouldn't do it if you have like a penchant for an eating disorder. Again, that harming yourself portion, right? So it does give you power. However, fasting isn't a requirement in order to have direct communication or divine guidance. I definitely then jumped to ask, is it at all possible that fasting or the command that you must fast is in fact a control mechanism by organized religion? I don't think that it's impossible that it could be. Think of it. If I told you that not eating, which can weaken the body, would connect you closer to God, and you stop eating, two things have now happened. You've created a truth through faith by believing that fasting will bring you closer to God. You feel closer to God. And separately, you've now given me power over your body and mind by putting yourself at risk to prove your faith in what I've told you. So it's not impossible. Now, Jesus fasted in the wilderness for 40 days. He fasted and meditated. And you know what fasting manifested towards him during that time? Temptation from Hasatan, the adversary. But reading through the Bible, there are many, many experiences with Jesus, many of them being some of the most important that occurred during meal times, during breaking bread together. I'm not saying fasting is bad or negative. In fact, it can seem to help cleanse your intuition and increase your intuition based on the cognitive testing and the accuracy improving. Connecting you more deeply with the answers that maybe you already inherently knew. But it can also open you up to some pretty terrible health consequences too. I would say that it's something for each person to choose their own path. Neither good nor bad, just an opportunity to explore another aspect of the divine existence. But I'll leave that for you to think about. Join me next week. I want to talk about vampires, where the lore comes from, their spiritual significance, and whether or not they exist in this reality. In the meantime, thank you for helping me take the occult and the apocalypse into just the hidden and the revealed. See you next week.